everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar about Upaya's ThreeWave COVID-19 response. I've met some of you. Some of you are new to me as well. My name is Bhat-Kincaid. I'm the Director of Philanthropy here at Upaya Social Ventures. We're so glad to have you here. This is an opportunity for us to share with you, our supporters, how Upaya is doing in the current COVID-19 climate, and also what we're working on to respond to our entrepreneurs and job holders, as well as plan for the aftermath of this crisis, which certainly is going to be something to think about in the long term. And with me on this call, on this webinar, are Kate Cochran, the CEO of Upaya Social Ventures, who I'm pretty sure you all know, and also Sachi Shenoy, our Chief Impact Officer and co-founder of Upaya, who I also am sure you all know. Before we get started, I do want to do a little bit of admin work with you, which I am sure you're very familiar with now with all the many Zoom calls. First of all, I just wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, so please be aware of that. We did bring you all into this call on mute, and I'm going to ask that you all stay on mute for the call just so that we don't distract from the speakers with all of our ambient noise around us. What you can do if you have questions is enter them in the chat function. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the little chat box, and if you click on that, you can enter your questions. And while Kate and Sachi are speaking, I will be monitoring that feed, and we have built in about 20 minutes into the end of this presentation to make sure that we have time for Q&A, and I'll be able to get some of your questions answered at that time. And we're also going to go ahead and turn off our cameras during the presentation so we can just focus on the PowerPoint and on the lovely voices of Kate and Sachi. But before we do that, I was wondering if we could all get on camera for just a moment so that we can all see each other. And Heather, would it be possible for us to do I can't remember what it's called. Kate, help me out. Yes, that. Thank you. And for those of you who are comfortable being on camera, I'd love to see all of your faces and meet all of you all at once. Awesome. Hi. Thank you so much for joining us. It makes me happy to see so many people on one screen. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and turn off those cameras, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I am going to start our program off with just talking about giving you an overview of who Upaya Social Ventures is. I know most of you are very familiar with our organization, and that's why you're here, but I wanted to do this particularly for those of you who might be new to our community, wanted to give you a sense of who we are. And then after that, Kate is going to talk about the impact that COVID is having on our job holders and entrepreneurs. Sachi will then spend the majority of our time talking about the ThreeWave strategy and how that's guiding our process right now. And then we'll circle back to Kate with some examples of how our partners are responding as well. And then we'll do the Q&A, and I can get some of your questions answered. So Heather, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so Upaya Social Ventures, we are an organization that fights extreme poverty by helping to generate jobs for the poorest of the poor. Around the world, there are 769 million people who are making less than $1.90 a day, and a third of them actually live in India. And so for the last 10 years, Upaya has been working to make sure that these people have an opportunity to have a stable, sustainable jobs, and that really lift them out of their state of poverty. And so the way that we do that is we support entrepreneurs who are building businesses that can employ the extreme poor and also have the potential to grow and continue to employ even more people in those communities. And so one thing I just wanted to cover very quickly is this is our track record. In these last 10 years, we have invested in 21 early stage businesses. And the other metric I want to point out, of course, is that we have generated over 15,000 jobs. And I have to tell you that as a team, we really debated on that plus sign next to the 15,000 because we really prefer to be very accurate with our numbers. But I wanted to let you know that number is evaluated and updated on a quarterly basis, and it's actually in the process of being finalized right now. So what we can tell you with complete certainty is that we are over 15,000, but We will update that exact number as soon as we're done with that process, and it'll be on our website as well. And really, I think we have to talk more about the job holders, which is in our next slide, and the impact there. These are the numbers that are really at the core of our mission, and data that we gather from both our business owners as well as the job holders themselves. And so what we're seeing so far is that we're seeing them able to save more money. They're experiencing a significant increase in earnings. So you can see that there's a 94% average increase in job holder income. And they're also seeing a level of stability and employment that they haven't seen in the past. And so this is a model that we really feel strongly about and have seen some great successes from. And so that's the very quick overview of who Upaya is and what we've accomplished. I'm now going to turn it over to Kate, who's going to kind of bring us into the current situation and orient us to our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Sumi. I really appreciate the overview, because even though we know that many of you on the call know us very well, some of you are joining us today to get to know us a little bit better. So thank you for the orientation. So these are obviously unprecedented times, and I tried really hard to come up with a different word than unprecedented, because it is being so overused, but really it's the only way we can describe this. I want to paint a picture for you of how this is affecting the companies we've invested in. As Sumi mentioned, we've made 21 investments at Upaya. 15 of those are active at this time. And all of the companies are being affected in different ways and to different degrees. For those of you who are not following particularly what is happening in India, let me tell you that in mid-March, the Indian government announced a very abrupt shutdown of the entire country for 3 weeks. India is the only country of its size that has attempted a countrywide shutdown, so it was quite monumental. Since that time, the government has extended, and next week we'll know whether they extend it again. Most estimates are hopefully for a gradual reopening starting next week, but certainly the disruption will be lasting for many, many months, if not over a year. So as I'm sure you can imagine, this shutdown has had enormous repercussions on all businesses, including the ones in our portfolio. A few companies, especially agriculture companies, are able to continue somewhat, but for most companies, it was a complete turnoff of revenue overnight. Some of these companies had already shut down their operations just to preserve cash, recognizing that disruption was coming. The government also, in an effort to be helpful, announced a policy of loan payments being suspended for 3 months, which had the natural but unfortunate follow-on effect that lenders essentially froze and stopped making new loans just when companies might need emergency cash. Upaya is actually jumping in to try to be helpful in this area, and Sachi will give some more details about that in a few minutes. Also understandably, but unfortunately, investors who are very far along in their process, including with some of our own companies, have suspended investments, waiting to see how the environment shakes out. So again, companies that were counting on receiving infusions of cash are stuck in a holding pattern at this point. And so even though, we do have some companies in our portfolio that are deemed essential goods and services, they're having a hard time operating because of the dramatic supply chain disruption. We have some apparel makers in our portfolio, and they have a distributed model, meaning that they have artisans working for them out of their homes, sort of in safety. But what we're hearing from them is they can't get the raw materials to their artisans. So even though they could be working, they can't actually complete very much. And then once the products are completed, they're not able to be distributed through retail outlets. Some online orders are continuing for these companies, although final delivery can sometimes be a challenge still. And then, of course, we're also seeing big disruption for companies that are reliant on exports for their revenue. You know, exporting into Europe or the United States or Australia is on hold right now, and it's not clear exactly when that logjam will open up. And so finally, I'm sure many of you have seen the heartbreaking photos in journalism around the effect of this lockdown on migrant day laborers. You know, people who are used to eking out a living with day wages in cities were forced to attempt to go back to their home villages in order to be with family and to have support and honestly food. In some cases, this has also threatened the labor force for the companies we work with because they are providing those daily jobs. And they are concerned, understandably, that when the lockdown opens up, their labor force has dispersed. So that's a picture of what is going on with our companies. If we can go to the next slide. Now let's talk about what we know is happening to the extreme poor in India, the people we're doing this work for. Globally, the international organization Oxfam has estimated that this pandemic could pull 500 million people back into poverty, just at a time when we have been celebrating our progress toward reaching the Sustainable Development Goal of no poverty by 2030. And let me let that sink in, 500 million people. This would wipe out the progress of the past 30 years. One of the things that we think of at Upaya as being so critical is to provide job holders stability. You know, a hallmark of extreme poverty is just the very uncertainty of their lives. There's nothing about this current pandemic, of course, that is certain, except uncertainty. And so, of course, this is affecting the extreme poor the worst. Once the lockdown in India was announced, all transportation was also shut down, so people took to the roads by foot in what has been called the largest internal migration in India since partition. You know, this is not only a tragedy of enormous proportion, and the enormous proportion that we won't even know for probably many months, if not a year, when researchers are able to quantify it. What we do know is that this is the very population that we focus on, and they're going to be desperate to find jobs as soon as the economy starts inching back. So with that setup of what we are looking at, I'd like to introduce Sachi to talk specifically about the steps that Upaya is taking to ensure that this population that we focus on so much will have jobs waiting for them when we're able to get back to normal.
Thank you so much, Kate. Now, before I get into our strategy and our tactics, I'll be very honest. We as a team probably spent the first half of March just absorbing what was happening. As a team, we felt completely overwhelmed, as I'm sure all of us have. And each day we were reading the headlines, you know, with sinking stomachs, and we were getting on the phone with our entrepreneurs, and we were just trying to get our arms around the problem. And of course, every day it felt like there was a new development. All we really knew was that we were heading into turbulent waters. And that's a phrase I think we've all used quite a bit in these last few weeks. But in the face of so much uncertainty, we felt the best thing we could do was to break the problem down into more manageable chunks. We said, okay, let's think of this in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So we asked ourselves, number one, what is the immediate need? What has to happen today? Number two, what is our hypothesis for the next 3 months? And let's just think about 3 months out. And then number three, of course, what can we do now to be ready for the recovery phase? however far off that may be. And on top of these questions, we forced ourselves to overlay the filter of our core skills as a team. We knew we weren't going to reinvent ourselves overnight. And so we said, what is the best use of our resources and unique expertise? So in keeping with this turbulent water theme, we came up with a 3-wave strategy to help us refocus the team, reallocate, reprioritize, and just keep us all rowing in the same direction. So wave 1 is all about providing immediate relief, i.e. Stopping the bleeding, if you will. Some of our investments are structured as convertible notes. And so one of the first decisions we made was to waive interest payments. With revenues practically frozen, as Kate mentioned, we knew that our partners needed to preserve as much cash as they could. We also heard from our partners that they needed cash and grants fast. I mean, lack of liquidity is the real problem right now. They wanted cash so that they could be able to provide paid leaves or salary advances to their job holders, or just help job holders address the immediate urgent needs. And so they just needed cash to plug in these gaps. In the past month, through our network, we saw a number of much larger institutions announce millions in rapid relief aid that was available. Now, providing relief and aid is an art in and of itself. Not only do we at Upaya not have the deep pockets of, say, a $1 billion foundation, but we also don't necessarily have the expertise to deploy grants for relief purposes. So even though we saw the need, we said we were going to instead leverage our network to identify opportunities that we felt were good fits for our companies. And we have committed to keep our entrepreneurs constantly apprised of them. We have also worked very closely with a few of them to actually apply for that aid. Now, just imagine for a second the world from our entrepreneurs' point of view. They are running around every day putting out fires right now. They really don't have the time to research all the funding opportunities and fill out potentially lengthy applications. So that is really where we were able to step in. Several of our partners have told us that our help just getting those applications in was a huge boost, and they were really grateful for that support. Lastly, in the relief bucket, we are convening virtual troubleshooting Zoom webinars for all the entrepreneurs in our portfolio. It's really extraordinary what happens when you bring together 20+ entrepreneurs in one place. First of all, they find that they're not alone, and they share creative ideas with each other about how they've tackled problems. And it turns out a lot of them are facing the exact same problems. The peer support has been really powerful to observe, and we're going to continue facilitating this. Wave 2 is about job stabilization. As Sumi mentioned, we are proud that in this past decade, we have helped create more than 15,000 jobs. In the next 3 months, our biggest priority is to preserve as many of those as we can. And that means doubling down on our existing portfolio and extending flexible funding so that they can keep the lights on. Now, Kate mentioned how there are other investors that have hit the pause button, but I am really proud of the effort that our team has made. And one thing that I've been deeply involved with is the reimagining of our investment model. As many of you know, our core product has been patient equity capital, but faced with COVID, we realized quickly that this might not be the most appropriate. I mean, would we necessarily ask our entrepreneurs to part with more of their ownership stake in their own companies just so they can get an infusion of cash? Well, not necessarily. And at the same time, many of them have been reluctant to take on more debt, if debt was even available. Especially something like a standard loan, which would have repayments kicking in relatively quickly. Just not being sure of when recovery would happen was causing that increased anxiety for our entrepreneurs. So we raced to establish what we're calling a stabilization fund. And this gives us the ability to extend revenue share loans and other flexible products like loan guarantees. A revenue share loan is essentially a commitment by the entrepreneur to pay us back a small percentage of their revenues when their revenues start up again. And we estimate that it might take between 2 to 4 years for them to be able to repay that amount back. We feel that this is a much better way to align incentives and really help the entrepreneurs focus on rebuilding, not burdening them with a liability, in the short term. Within the last 3 weeks, we conceptualized this fund, modeled it out, and approved our very first investment through an independent investment committee. And as entrepreneurs rebuild and possibly pivot their operations, many have told us that they have questions about what work is appropriate for their job holders and whether their job holders will even be receptive to the changes with everything that they are managing. So we said, okay, if we're not really sure what their needs are, let's ask them. We at Upaya are skilled at deploying surveys. We really love surveying our job holders. And over the years, we've been able to collect very objective feedback directly from the poor. We realize that it may be difficult for our entrepreneurs to get that objective feedback from their employees. So we said, here we go, we're going to jump in and help. So just in this last week, we have developed a COVID-specific survey, and this is meant to assess critical needs, stressors, and income levels at this time. And we are planning to deploy these surveys starting next week. In these surveys, we are asking questions like, what are you most worried about right now? Is it health, food, shelter, income, all of the above? Are you able to earn anything right now? If so, how much? And what are you doing for work? Do you have savings you can rely on? And how far do you think your savings will extend? So we plan to aggregate all these responses over the next 4 weeks and share our findings more broadly. And lastly, in this Wave 2 bucket is the work we have always done, consulting and advising our entrepreneurs, but now with so much more urgency than before, and with an eye to asking, how should they change their operations and how should they adapt to weather the storm? And lastly, Wave 3 is all about job creation. Now, no one really knows how we will recover from this crisis, but when we do, one thing is undeniable. We are going to need jobs, lots of jobs, and the poor will need them most of all, for all the reasons Kate was talking about. Even when other investors have hit pause, we are continuing our activities the very best we can with a goal of building a pipeline of new companies. We want to be ready with investment when the time is right. As many of you know, we run an accelerator program each year, and this helps us identify high potential entrepreneurs and select the ones that we feel can create the best and most jobs. This week, we just launched a virtual version of our accelerator, and we are super excited by the 11 companies in this year's cohort. Outside the accelerator, we are getting to know other companies that we feel also have promise. We are developing a hypothesis of what jobs will look like in a post-COVID world, and we're learning a ton from entrepreneurs about what it is that their communities really need. So our goal is to invest in 3 to 6 new companies by the end of this year. Now, I should say that our investment decisions are contingent on us being able to make field visits and really observe what is happening on the ground so that we can validate what the entrepreneurs are telling us. we sincerely hope that travel within India will be resumed, and this will be the critical piece we'd be dependent on to make these investment decisions. So all in all, I will just summarize by saying we've been busy, but we are extremely proud of the fact that while many other investors are waiting out the storm and observing to see what happens next, we are diving headfirst into the water with new tools, and we're trying to help in any way we can. Of course, just the reality of the situation is we may have to revisit all of this in a month or 3 months' time, but we are committed to staying nimble over the next few months and really adapt as necessary. So now I'll turn it back to Kate to talk about the things that really give us hope.
Great, thank you, Sachi. So before we move into questions, we wanted to highlight some of the inspiring and hopeful actions that are already being taken by our entrepreneurs. I think it speaks to their soul and motivation, the lengths that they are going to protect their job holders. One of the first responses that we heard was Arindam Dasgupta from Tamil Plates, and some of our longtime supporters I know this company quite well. So completely beyond protecting his company and looking to restart operations as soon as he can, Arindam has already launched a campaign to raise $70,000 for direct cash transfers to job holders. He's providing about $20 per family for each of the 4,500 suppliers that he relies on to collect the raw materials for his plates. So far, he has raised, I think, about a third of his goal and reached 1,000 households. This was probably launched, I think, within a week of the lockdown. And he has been providing weekly updates of how many people he has reached. I think in the chat box, we might actually even have a link to that campaign. Yes, thank you, Sumi. If anyone wants to participate, we'd highly encourage you to do that. As I said, he's reached 1,000 families, and he is trying to reach the other 3,500. Another impressive and proactive step that we saw is this company in the middle of our slide here is Lul10, one of the newest companies in our portfolio. And they normally have a business where they source very nice attire and home accessories that are created by artisans in rural villages. In response to COVID, they have pivoted some of these artisans to being able to create personal protective equipment that they can deliver to medical sites. They are making masks, and they're actually also looking to do like complete gowns, and not just the masks and the sort of easy things, but possibly even the plastic shields that we've all seen in pictures. And they did that within 2 weeks of the lockdown happening. And then, beyond that, nearly every company in our portfolio has told us that they are providing cash advances. One normally does bonuses to their job holders in October, and they have brought that forward. One sort of innovative approach is a company has put down a line of credit for all of their job holders at the local grocery store where they shop, so that even while they may not have cash, they can still get food. Most of the companies in our portfolio that have regular wage earners have promised to keep paying salaries even during the lockdown. So these are the kinds of things that, as Sachi said, give us hope, give us inspiration to keep doing this work. And I wanted to just wrap up on, one other note that I heard about this morning. I was reading about a case study that was done by BRAC, which is one of the giants in our industry, has been focusing on the extreme poor for decades. And they were working in Sierra Leone and Liberia just after the Ebola epidemic. And one of the programs that BRAC runs is a microfinance delivery. And when they went back to Liberia and Sierra Leone after Ebola, they felt pretty certain that they would just have to write off all of their microcredit activities, that all of the loans would be defaulted on, and that they were going to just have to start from scratch because these were communities that had been completely devastated by Ebola. And instead, what they found when they got back there is that all of their clients were eager to start repaying. They were happy to take additional loans to be able to restart their businesses so that they could repay, but they were eager to engage again and to be productive again. And I think it's that kind of resilience that we are all counting on and hoping that we can help build a bridge to that next phase once we get out of this immediate unsettling time. So with that, I'd like to open things up for your questions.
Yeah, and thank you, Kate. Sorry. And we can perhaps come back on video, shall we? I think it's nice to see faces that are actually talking, and everyone's welcome to come on video if you'd like. All right, so the first question that is here is from Parvati Patel. Thank you for posting a question. She said, wonderful to learn about your ThreeWave strategy through these difficult and uncertain times. How are you surveying job holders to assess their critical needs given the lockdown in India? And can you speak to what you plan on doing with the survey results?
So thank you, Parvati. I'm happy to take this, but obviously, Kate, Sumi, please feel free to jump in. So we are planning to deploy surveys starting next week. And because of the lockdown, we're going to do everything by phone. And so even earlier this morning, we had a training session with the agency that we have now used for a few years to train them on using sensitivity and asking these questions, what they need to do to try to establish rapport with the job holders, because over the phone it can be so impersonal, and we're obviously broaching a very touchy topic. And so I think I mentioned some of the questions we'd be asking, but we really want to get a sense for how are all the different ways that they are being affected during the lockdown. And is there one thing that is really keeping them up at night? And what might we or our entrepreneurs be able to do to address those needs? So we anticipate, our goal is to survey at least 150 or up to 200 job holders. And we're taking a random sample all across our portfolio. So we hope to hit about 6 different states and different regions. And we hope by the end of May to publish those results. I think at the very least, it'll be a blog post, with some of our analysis, and we'll definitely try to push it out more widely just so other organizations that are working in the poverty space can benefit, because there's really nothing like hearing directly from the people you are trying to serve.
Great. And if I can jump in there and just say that, I see some of our industry friends who are joining us here. Village Enterprise is represented and Women on Wings is represented. And I apologize if I'm overlooking others. We very much want to be transparent with this. I know that when we're talking with our industry colleagues, we are all wondering what is the lived experience of the ultimate beneficiaries we're trying to reach. And so to the extent that we are getting insights that can help us all strengthen our programs, we absolutely will be sharing that.
And Parvati said thank you. And while people are thinking about if they have any other questions, Kate, one thing that I was thinking about, and you kind of touched on this as well, is, you know, what are some of our partners doing, and what are the ways in which we are also working with other peers as we're going through this, because it's such a huge problem to really tackle on our own.
Yeah, I think, you know, Sumi and I were just on a call with actually Caroline, I'll call you out, who's on this call, which was this morning trying to coordinate the efforts of impact investors and exploring different ways that we can help each other to be more efficient and effective in either getting money out the door, relying on each other's due diligence. Sachi mentioned, for example, that, you know, we wouldn't make an investment if we hadn't done a site visit and actually met the job holders, and that is absolutely the way we normally operate. In, you know, these very strange years, we may consider partnering with, you know, a trusted partner, say like Vilgro in India, whose due diligence we trust. If they were able to do a site visit prior to this, you know, we might consider an investment like that. We're also, Sachi talked about our stabilization fund. For some of the companies we have investments in, there are co-investors who are saying, hey, we want to be helpful as well in providing emergency loans if needed. We were exploring whether it would make sense for them to fund that money through our stabilization fund in our India entity. So I think it's, there's a lot of improvisation happening right now. But kind of with the principle of, can we be more efficient and effective at doing things that might have taken us 6 months in a normal time, but given the urgency of the time, can we do things, you know, more quickly by working with others?
So far, it doesn't look like we have additional questions. Is there anything else either of you would like to add? It means that you did such an amazing job that there are just no questions.
Sachi, I'll let you go unless you'd like me to.
I think you should go first, Kate, and I'm happy to add on.
Okay. Well, so my, this is, you know, just a very broad, overarching comment to say thank you to everyone who joined this call, because we are all, you know, seeing how many organizations are trying, you know, to share updates on what they are doing. And I know many of the people who are joining the call, I'm seeing your name. I know how many other organizations you are supporting. So I appreciate your taking the time. But I also know that after this, you know, fairly brief update, you may have some very particular questions that you want to follow up on, didn't want to do in a more public format. Please know that, you know, for once, I at least am not traveling much. Nobody on the team is traveling much. We're here. And one of the things that's giving us energy these days is being able to connect with our supporters and hear about what's happening in your lives. And share firsthand, you know, what we're seeing and what our team is experiencing. So we'd love to schedule one-on-one calls as well after this.
Yes.
Anything
and both
you'd add,
Caroline
Sachi?
and Robin.
I would completely second everything that Kate said, and maybe just to add that even if it is virtual coffee and virtual brainstorming sessions, we would love to do those as well. So many of the ideas that I talked about, you know, that are really underlying our ThreeWave strategy have come out of brainstorming sessions with others. And they have just sparked really good ideas for us that we were then, you know, able to act on. So again, we really wouldn't be able to do this without our community.
I do have one more question that popped up, but also I wanted to mention that Caroline and Robin both wrote notes that we did a good job, great presentation. So thank you. So from Ashi Garg, I'm going to read the whole note. Absolutely admire the work by Upaya Social Ventures. This is Ashi Garg from Indore, MP in India. my question is, does Upaya Social Venture think going forward, is impact investing going to become more mainstream in India, given the most affected section of the society is poor?
So I'll take a crack at that and invite Sachi to add on. I think that impact investing already is it is mainstream. And in fact, one of the things that some of us talk about in the industry is that there are so many impactful companies in India that it just feels like investing. We all have different approaches and different ways that we measure our impact. And of course, for Upaya, it is about job creation for the extreme poor. But there are so many other investors who are focused on getting goods and services into the hands of the poor in a way that will better their lives. And that this, nascent industry 10 years ago has really grown to be quite dramatic. In fact, the Indian Impact Investing Council conference, the first year I went to, there were about 300 people, and the last one I think was well over 1,000. So I think that's a positive trend, that we're getting capital to the companies that can really make a positive difference. And I feel like I should just do a shout out for Indore, because one of our colleagues on our India team is from Indore and is frequently speaking its praises. So he'll be happy to know that you're on the call. Sachi, anything you'd add?
I think the only thing I'd add is my hopes that, yes, a lot more funding has come in. We are seeing so much more activity by other impact investors just in the last few years, and certainly over this last decade. What I'm hoping we will see is more creativity around investment vehicles. I think early on, people, really started off with debt because they knew how that would work, and then slowly came patient equity, which is also when we came in. And now what I'm really jazzed by is when I'm talking to other investors, they really are thinking way outside the box and saying, how can we put together hybrid instruments? How can we bring together the best of both worlds, like debt and equity? How do we give entrepreneurs, that patient time horizon? So I'm hoping at least that this will really cause more of a spark in more innovative models.
Great. Looks like we don't have any other questions. So if there's nothing else to add, I think we can just conclude our webinar. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for joining us. We were very intentional in wanting to specifically invite our community that has supported us all this time. And we're just really, really appreciative of your support. Kate and I have had a lot of conversations, I know Sachi has as well, with many of you, and really your unwavering support at this time has meant a lot to us. So I just wanted to really just say thank you. And as Kate said, we would love for you to reach out to us, and we'll be reaching out to you as well, and are happy to have more detailed conversations about everything that's going on right now. And I hope, we hope that all of your families and loved ones are doing well and staying safe and healthy as well.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.